Welcome to the 11th episode of the MMA Podcast. We had last week off, but we're back this week to bring you 2 weeks of MMA news. It was a crazy 2 weeks. UFC 151, the first UFC card to be completely canceled in the wake of Dan Henderson pulling out of injury and John Jones refusing to fight a replacement. We also have tons of other stuff to talk about. Ronda Rousey continues her crazy streak of arm bars. Dana White asked fans what they would think about Brock versus Fedor. Alistair Overeem says he will not wait for a title shot. Anderson Silva seems pretty dead on to fight George St. Pierre, and much more. We got Robert Drysdale on in a couple minutes, too. Let's do it.
We did it, mama. We did it. We did it for the love of the game. We did it, mama. We did it. I did it for.
And like we said at the top, thank you for tuning in to the 11th episode of the MMA Podcast. Big shout out to Smoke Serpent, Eddie Bravo, for letting us use that dope intro. Shout out to Robert Drysdale, who we will literally have on in just about 2 minutes. Also, a shout out to our partners, MMAmental.com, MMAplayground.com. And we always encourage you to join in on the conversation. You can call us at 646-378-1046 or tweet us at the MMA Podcast. I'm actually about to throw up on the site now that we are live. And visit our website, themmmapodcast.com. What's up, Chris?
We're back, bitches!
We're back, bitches! And
yeah, it feels good to be back.
It feels very good. I actually moved across the country, which was the main reason why we didn't have a show last week. I was in a hotel room in Kentucky on Wednesday night, so it was a little too hard to swing a road trip across the country and throw the podcast in there. But I'm settled into Chicago, loving my new hometown. Don't know whether it's just going to be for the fall or permanent, but I'm really loving my my new city.
Yeah, man, it's got to be crazy going from, the swamps of Florida to the, what would you call it, like grasslands of Chicago?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely a big change. And Florida, it's actually about the same temperature. It's about 95 in Florida. It's 90 here. But it could not be any more different. In Florida, it's just that still, humid, swamp heat. And in Chicago, you actually have breezes coming in off Lake Michigan. It's, it is called the Windy City, and it's called that for a reason. It's always breezy. It's always nice. It's probably going to get a little brutal once winter rolls around and it gets cold. But, hey, I'm actually looking forward to the winter. I'm a big fan of the cold weather.
Yeah, man, you're a city boy now. You're in the city now. So, yeah. All of our listeners out there and fans of the show, just put your prayers and thoughts out for Mr. Walters. He's got a couple months stretch that's going to be different and alien, but he'll adapt and survive because that's what we do.
I'm like a chameleon. I'm always adapting.
Yeah, you're like a T-1000 or a Predator or something like that, yeah.
Something very similar to that.
Maybe both.
Maybe. I might even be both. But yeah, it's rolling up on 6:05 Eastern Time, and we said we'd give Robert Drysdale a call. So without any further ado, I guess, let me call him up. I actually was just trying to figure out where I save this in my phone. It's a very I have my contacts ordered very retardedly. You want to sing a song for them while I serve up some good pod, some dead air?
What kind of a song do you want? You know what? I'll just.
I actually just found it, and I'm calling Robert right now.
I will not sing a song.
All right, let's see if we can get Mr. Drysdale on the line. All right, it looks like we were not able to reach him. He might give us a call back. Last time he actually had a class pop up he forgot about and couldn't reach us, so it's all good. We honestly will probably get back with him in a couple minutes. Hey, a lot of times we'll call someone up and they'll be talking to somebody or something. They'll call right back. But, yeah, we should have Robert on in a little bit. Truly one of the best grapplers in American history. But I guess for now, let's just move on. UFC 151. Jesus Christ. That was probably the biggest fiasco in UFC history. And the UFC has seen a lot of fiascos recently. This was absolutely insane.
That was a clusterfuck. Go to the MMA Podcast.com. Jake popped up a timeline that shows you exactly how many things went into that event being absolutely canceled, and I think it all rests on the shoulders of Jon Jones, in my humble opinion.
And I think most MMA fans agree with you there. Jon Jones has really caught the ire of a lot of fans, mainly because of the fact that he turned down a fight, and champions don't turn down fights. They just don't. Even Dana White said he'd never seen anything like it before. Just a really, really strange turn of events that happened. Basically, Dan Henderson apparently injured his knee about 3 weeks before UFC 151. Wasn't sure if he was going to fight or not in it. Still wanted to feel it out and wait and see how it felt. And then the bomb dropped 8 days before UFC 151 was supposed to take place. Rumors were swirling a few hours before he made the immediate decision, but eventually it came down from Mr. Henderson himself that there was not going to be a Dan Henderson-Jon Jones title fight. But, you know, UFC 151 was still alive at that point. It was still kicking, and the UFC actually approached Jon Jones kind of out of the blue and asked if he wanted to fight Chael Sonnen, somebody who has never fought in the light heavyweight division in the UFC.
Yeah, he actually did fight light heavy, but that wasn't his first run with the company.
That was in the WEC, correct, or am I wrong?
No, he actually fought Jeremy Horn and Trevor Prangley at 205, but, you know, he wasn't a good 205er, and he hasn't fought at that weight in a long time, so why would a guy coming off a loss in a middleweight title fight get a shot at Jones? I mean, and here's why. Shogun, Machida, both turned down the fight. It's incredible. They both turned down the short notice fight, and I'm kind of wondering why they didn't go after some other guys, like maybe Alexander Gustafsson. What do you think happened with that?
It really makes you kind of wonder about the warrior mentality of guys like that. You know, Shogun, I really can't take anything away from him because you look at every single one of his fights, even the most recent one against Brandon Vera, every one of his fights is an absolute war. But yeah, both of them refused to fight Jon Jones on 8 days' notice, and Chael Sonnen actually had been mocking Jon Jones through Twitter the week leading up to Dan Henderson's injury. Jon Jones's camp said the only reason he was doing this is because he knew Henderson was injured and was going to pull out. But my argument is, if Dan Henderson knew he wasn't going to fight, there's no reason for him to prolong it and pretend like he was. I think he may have injured his knee, but he was probably, like I said before, waiting, feeling himself out. Wasn't exactly sure what he was going to do. And because of that, just, you know, trained up till the point where he knew 100%, I can't do this. I had mentioned Sonnen was mocking Jon Jones before, and I'll actually break it down now. First Sonnen said in a press interview, it actually wasn't on a Twitter, but in a press interview, Chael said he was going to clean up whatever was left behind by Dan Henderson, which kind of disproves John Jones' camp's whole theory on the fact that Chael knew Dan Henderson was injured, because this entire thing was started by Chael saying he was going to clean up whatever was left behind by Hendo. John Jones quickly answers, "The things you say about me hold absolutely no weight. You disrespected Anderson and his country, but fought like a child. If you're going to disrespect me out of nowhere, at least disrespect me to my face like a man. And you call me a punk, I'm more man than you'll ever be. Hashtag coward, hashtag cheater," which the hashtag coward line holds a little bit of irony now after him turning down a fight against Chael Sonnen. Sonnen then had to rebuke, saying, "Boarding plane to Oregon now, home of your corporate wage masters. Racism. Next time you're in town, knock on my door. Don't drive," which is a pretty hilarious quip against John Jones' DUI. And then he says, "Advice to Johnny Bones, take some of that Nike money, hire new riders."
Yeah, he just ripped him apart.
He ripped him apart, and John Jones replied like a child, "You're an idiot. If you think I haven't heard every DUI joke in the book, I applaud original ones. That's powerless," which, honestly, I don't think if I came up with like a really hilarious original DUI joke and said it to John Jones, he probably wouldn't laugh. And then he says, "You aren't worth my time. Earn a title shot instead of trying to talk your way into one, and I'll be glad to hurt you." Again, very ironic, considering just a few days later he turned down a fight against Sonnen, and Sonnen ended the conversation with, "Oh, I plan to. By the way, how long did it take your parents to come up with the name John Jones? Creative," which we actually caught at the end of the last podcast, and you told us about, Chris. But yeah, it was a constant back and forth. We'll never know if Chael started this because he knew Henderson was hurt. I'm guessing not, just because the whole thing started with him saying he was going to clean up whatever Henderson left behind. But very, very messy situation. No one really likes what conspired there. I actually just to get off that topic really quick, I actually just received Chael Sonnen's book in the mail today.
Oh, yeah, dude, the Book of Reason.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the Voice of Reason. Voice of Reason, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't really tabbed through it yet, but you know who wrote the foreword to his book?
Who?
Jesus Christ.
That's incredible.
Jesus Christ wrote the foreword to Chael Sonnen's book, so...
Real Jesus Christ?
The real one? Yeah, the actual one. So if there's ever a reason to read Chael Sonnen's book, it's the fact that Jesus Christ in the flesh wrote the foreword, and I'm pretty sure it ended with XOXO.
You can't get any better than JC opening the foreword to your book.
Just Herald Christ in the flesh. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to reading that. But to get back to UFC 151. Jones refuses to fight Chael Sonnen, and then after that, it was announced to everybody that John Jones would face Lyoto Machida September 22nd in Toronto, and that fight booking lasted about 2 days before Machida decided to pull out of the fight. I don't know if he was just taking time off, he wasn't ready in time, but I mean, I see Lyoto and Shogun's reasoning, knowing that they both probably only have one more shot at John Jones. The UFC never typically gives a trilogy to someone who's lost the first two fights. As crazy marketable as Sonnen Silva was, even Dana White said we probably wouldn't see a trilogy, and that Chael Sonnen was back at the end of the line. So I kind of get if they didn't feel that they had enough time to prepare, which they had less than a month, maybe not wanting to do that. So Lyoto Machida is tabbed to fight Chael Sonnen, or
really?
No, to fight Jones rather, and then he pulls out. And that is when Dana White made the decision to cancel UFC 151. Or he actually, I think, did it before that, but they fell really close to one another. Either way, it's pretty insane. And 150 UFC cards, even in all the FX cards, the Spike cards, the Fox cards, the Versus cards, none ever had to be canceled. And this is the first UFC that got totally canceled.
And it just goes without saying, not only is this a travesty because an entire event gets canceled, all the people that work on it, that fight for it, I mean, you got a lot of guys that won't be able to pay their bills for a little while longer. But on top of that, you know, there's no MMA for like a month and a half, and Dana White has stopped tweeting completely. Dana White just has not been on Twitter since August 20th or something like that. So, I mean, it's just a travesty to everyone involved, and it comes down to a few people. I mean, the UFC could have come up with a new headliner, but most likely it wouldn't be a good draw on this short notice. But excuse me, it falls on the shoulders of Shogun, Machida, and Jones. I think all those guys they ruined the card. It's understandable for the guys not wanting a short notice fight against Jones, but I mean they could have at least stepped up to the plate, and they didn't. And Jones turned down Chael, and I was going to ask you, why do you think he turned down Chael? I personally don't think Chael has anything to offer him inside the cage. What do you think his motives were? Hello?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute there. What Jackson's camp argues is that Chael Sonnen is a much different fighter than Dan Henderson, and honestly, I kind of call bullshit on that.
Is that the only reason? Do you think he's actually scared?
I think he's hurt. I think he's scared.
Hurt, George, hurt.
Hurt. You know, I really couldn't give you an answer, and it's the reason why everyone's so mad at Jon Jones, because there isn't a good, reasonable answer on why Jon Jones would not take the fight. You know, as far as it being on short notice, you know what? It's short notice for you and your opponent. It's not just a short notice fight for you. It isn't like Chael Sonnen's been getting ready to fight Jon Jones for the last 4 months. You know, Jon Jones is bigger, he's stronger, he's more athletic, he's like his size is such an advantage over Sonnen. You know, Sonnen is moving up a weight class from middleweight, and Jones is a guy who could fight at heavyweight. He's so lanky, he's got more reach than 7-foot-tall Stefan Struve. He has so many tools over Jon Jones. I really don't see why he wouldn't do it. You know, if there's one good takeaway to take out of this, you know, it's kind of like when Sonnen fought Michael Bisping. I was kind of disappointed only because the fight was on short notice and they weren't going to have that much time to talk shit to each other. With this, it's kind of the same exact thing. They had already been talking a lot of shit, and you know, an 8-day notice, you got to fight pack a whole card's worth of trash talk into 8 days. I feel like Sonnen will eventually fight Jon Jones. You know, Sonnen should beat Forrest Griffin. Sonnen, you know, he'll probably get put up for one more 205-pound match before getting a title shot. But really light heavyweight's kind of a unique division in that none of the fighters who are contending for the title, with the exception of maybe Alexander Gustafsson, all of them have already lost to Jon Jones.
Yes, absolutely. I think Chael will, like you said, he'll run through Forrest, he'll get another top 10, and then get a title shot. Me personally, I have no interest in that fight. Beyond the trash talking, I don't feel that Sonnen has anything for him. But you know what? You never know. The sport's very volatile. Everything could change with one punch. So you can't count out, a gangster from West Lynn.
You know, I don't think anybody gave Chael Sonnen a chance before Sonnen Silva won, and we saw what he went out and did. Sonnen is definitely a more technical wrestler than Jon Jones. Even though Jones is a great wrestler, don't get me wrong. I feel like most of his wrestling skill is derived out of his strength. He is very technical, but Sonnen is maybe the most technical wrestler in the entire sport. He has that just uncanny ability to shoot a double leg and put you on your ass. If he was able to duck under those crazy, elbows and lanky arms and put in a takedown, really against a guy like Chael Sonnen, you only gotta let 3 takedowns happen and you lose the fight, He is a guy who will take you down, and his wrestling is so technical. He has no problem, even against top level jiu-jitsu guys like Anderson Silva. He has no problem keeping you on your ass, not letting you up, and inflicting enough damage, at least what looks like damage, to keep the fight on the ground and stop the ref from standing it up.
That was a great breakdown, man. That's exactly, man. The wrestling's going to be the equalizer of the fight, but the question is, who will be the stronger man? Nobody could really contend with Sonnen's strength for strength at middleweight. Do you think he's going to carry over that strength to the 205 division?
At 185, Sonnen is about, his strength level, I feel like, is on par with a lot of those light heavyweights. And I think that's why he can go down to a middleweight and dominate a guy. But when he goes up a weight class, his strength advantage is definitely quelled a lot. He's had a strength advantage, I want to say, in every one of his middleweight fights, except maybe the Nate Marquardt fight against a guy like John Jones, against the guy, I'm thinking about it. Other than John Jones, I can't, and name doesn't pop in my head as this guy is stronger than Chael Sonnen.
Yeah, he's cock diesel for sure. That guy's been tossing dudes on their head since he was a little baby, and I think he's been doing it longer than Jones. So I can't see why he would have an issue in that fight beyond the striking element.
Yeah. So Sonnen was gonna take the fight and actually told people, and no one's come out and refuted it, so we gotta believe it's true. He apparently offered to fight John Jones for free.
Yeah, of course he would. He would fight any man that God put on this earth. We know this. And money is no issue for him as well. I could see Chael taking off his jacket and rolling his sleeves up. It's just one of those things where he's afraid of no man, and Jones proved that he is afraid of one guy. I mean, obviously he would have taken the fight if he was fully confident. There's no reason on earth why you wouldn't want the payday that fighting Chael Sonnen would bring. I mean, really, the guy is the best trash talker inside the UFC, and John isn't. So I'm sure he was intimidated a little bit. I just can't see why he wouldn't take that fight.
Definitely. And like we were saying, the title of the article that I wrote that includes the timeline from the beginning to end of this whole fiasco is Public Enemy Number 1, a blow-by-blow of UFC 151, because that's really what John Jones is now. John Jones has received so much hate. Actually, it's pretty funny. I have read the guy who owns the Twitter handle John Jones, because John Jones has the Twitter handle Johnny Bones. So there's actually a guy named John Jones, spelled the same way, Jonjones, who has a Twitter account. Just a normal everyday guy. And I read an interview with him. He said it went from, every day maybe 3 or 4 people might accidentally tweet at John Jones, and it was an occasional thing. When all this news came down, he said he was getting over 100 tweets per minute of people just blasting him and insulting him and just going off on him. And luckily, the guy seems to have a pretty good sense of humor about it. But yeah, pretty funny how all of that conspired. And actually, it started a internet meme called "Good Guy John Jones," and he's this white bald guy, and he's smiling. And a bunch of funny stuff under that. Good guy John Jones, bad guy John Jones. John Jones is not a very well-liked name within the MMA community right now. And Dana White, if you did not see the main announcement where he said he was canceling UFC 151, definitely watch that because it was good. And it actually looks like we have Robert Drysdale. He just called in. Let me patch him through. Robert?
Hey.
Hey, what's up, man? How's it going?
What's going on, guys?
Not too much. We're actually just talking UFC 151, but we're glad to have you on the line. Before we start asking you questions, we were talking about this whole John Jones fiasco in UFC 151. What is your take on it?
It's a tough one, man. I think that it might be that John Jones just being respectful towards his coach. I don't think John Jones is actually backing down from the fight. I think that Greg Jackson, for a reason I, to be completely honest, don't fully understand, doesn't want that fight to happen. And, John Jones just being respectful towards his coach. That's how I see it.
Dana White, actually, I was just about to mention, Dana White went as far as to call Greg Jackson a sport killer. Do you agree with his sentiments at all?
Look, I think at the end of the day, he was scheduled to fight Dan Henderson. I think that Chael Sonnen is, I think if Chael Sonnen was at a disadvantage, so I think that John Jones could have taken the fight, but I understand it's in his right to say no. He's got every right in the world. He was scheduled to fight Dan Henderson. He doesn't have to accept the replacement. So I wouldn't call Greg Jackson a sport killer, but I don't agree with Greg Jackson's decision for that matter.
Definitely. And for those who are unaware, we're on the phone with Robert Drysdale, truly one of the best American grapplers in history. Won a 2000 gold at the ADCC Submission Wrestling World Championship, a gold at the World Jiu-Jitsu Championship, and he actually lives in Las Vegas and owns and operates his own jiu-jitsu academy. And I wanted to ask, what's it like owning and operating your own school on jiu-jitsu? I'm sure that's got to be a huge burden.
It's gotten to the point. I've been in this for like almost 4 years now, so it's gotten to the point where the business runs itself, and that's the hard part, getting the business to kind of flow. So I kind of overlook everything. It doesn't burn me out. I think in the beginning it was a lot more work. Now it's sort of just me overseeing everything and make sure everything runs smoothly. And every now and then you got to talk to some of the students or some of the parents, or you get involved here and there. But to be completely honest with you, it's a lot less work right now.
Good. How difficult is it balancing the needs of your school against the needs of your own fighting career?
Not easy. It's not easy. I when I moved to Vegas, my fighting career was my top priority. Then people started asking for help, and then I started coaching, and I opened my school, and I enjoy all the teaching. I enjoy coaching, but it did kind of hinder my career a little bit. But I don't complain. Like, I really don't. Life is good. I managed to fight at least once a year. If I have my second fight this year coming up in November, so it has slowed my career down. But I'm not too concerned about it. Like, there are some other positive things that came out of me just kind of taking things slowly. So I feel that I'm a better MMA fighter now.
That's good to hear, man. This is Chris, co-host of the podcast. Rob, just wanted to let you know that it's a pleasure to be talking to you today, sir.
Oh, pleasure to talk to you, too.
A question for you in your school. What kind of names do you have coming through there? Do you have any big-time guys that are on Bellator or anything like that?
Man, we got so many names. Just today on the mat, I had James McSweeney, Uriah Faber, Benavides, who else? Man, we had that kid TJ from The Ultimate Fighter.
Dillashaw.
Yes. Who else? Just today. There's a constant rotation of guys coming in. We have, on average, easily 15 pro fighters on the mats every day, and I'd say at least half of them on the UFC. So, it's a constant rotation of guys. Everyone who comes to the Vegas, Ellenberger was here as well. It's a great guy to train with. So it's fun, man. Like, it's open doors for everyone. I'm not very political about it, so they just want to come in, roll, and learn some jiu-jitsu, and I'm happy to share with them.
Wow, it sounds like Team Alpha Male made a field trip out to Vegas. What's it like rolling with dudes who are, much smaller than you are?
I didn't really roll with any of them. It was just mostly me, coaching them here and there. I show them moves. I roll with the heavier weights, but I've rolled with lighter weights my whole life. It doesn't, it's something I don't have a problem with at all. Like, it's that most of my training parts on my jiu-jitsu career have been lighter than me, so which kind of did hurt me to some extent. But I think they're more technical. You probably learn more from them, whereas like heavier weight can be is normally more physical.
Definitely. Yeah, you really have some serious grappling credentials, like I mentioned before. And I was curious, what to you is your greatest achievement within the ranks of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
I think that would be the Jiu-Jitsu World Championships and the Abu Dhabi World Championships. Those two, gi and no gi, they're the two biggest tournaments in both modalities. And gi was always is my background. I made a shift to no gi a while right after I won the Worlds with the gi, and I won the Abu Dhabi, which is kind of like the BJJ version, the no gi version of the Jiu-Jitsu World Championships. And after that, I decided to move MMA. So once I accomplish one thing, I want to move on to something else and see what else is out there.
Yeah, you won gold in the absolute division against Marcelo Garcia, who is widely known as one of the best people around. What was it like trying to roll with a guy who is that technical and that cerebral in the sport?
I've been watching Garcia since he was a purple belt. Like, I've known the guy way before anyone knew who he was. I was very familiar with him. So we grew up in the same tournament circuit in Brazil. So we watched each other compete since still blue belts, purple belts. So we were very familiar with each other. He's a legend in the sport. So to me, it was more about being in the final of the absolute division in Abu Dhabi than it was about being in Marcelo Garcia. It just happened to be him there. But I think a lot of people look at that fight and go, I guess because he had such an impressive performance that tournament, and then the fight was so quick. Like, I tapped him like 2 minutes into the fight. So I think that's what impressed a lot of people. But it was a big day for me, not so much because who I was beating. Of course, that added to it, but mostly because it was just it's just the Abu Dhabi absolute division.
I wanted to ask you real quick a grappling question. When Nick Diaz was supposed to face Braulio Estima, he just no-showed and all that. How did you feel as a grappler and with the respect that most people have for each other in the community, and then this guy just doesn't even show up to a super fight that was supposed to give funds to charity?
Well, I think there's probably a lot more to the story than we know. I don't think Nick Diaz was backing out. I know that Braulio did make weight, so I think there was probably some miscommunication, some confusion there. So there's probably some miscommunication there as far as what really happened. Braulio did make weight. I was there. I don't think Nick Diaz was going to back out. He might have had. I don't know. I really can't say what happened, but I was surprised that Nick took that fight to begin with. Like, I would have been surprised if Nick had not been tapped that fight. Like, I wouldn't expect Nick Diaz to go in there and beat Braulio in a grappling match any more than I would expect Braulio to beat Nick Diaz in an MMA fight. In both cases would have surprised me. So I was surprised he took that fight, and it was. I had all my money on Braulio. I think Braulio was just going to run him over. No disrespect to Diaz, but it's just different. If Braulio stepped in UFC to fight Nick Diaz will destroy Braulio. I don't think that's not controversial. So the same holds for grappling.
No, I don't think anyone would argue with you there. Speaking of mixed martial arts, you mentioned before you're making the transition from jiu-jitsu to mixed martial arts. What made you want to make that transition, and how long were you thinking about making the move before you actually did it?
I think I always liked the sport. It's something I always wanted to do. It was. When I first started training jiu-jitsu, jiu-jitsu and MMA weren't two distinct sports like they are today. It was kind of the same thing. If you did one, you did the other. I got really into jiu-jitsu competitions early on, and that was there's a lot of competitions in the area when I was coming up in Brazil, so I really got into the competition circuit, and that kind of led me away from MMA. But it's something I always wanted to do, just more than anything out of the challenge of just doing something different. I think I'll be able to say I'm a complete fighter if I can master the MMA aspect of it as well. I think the grappling aspect is something I've been mastering far from being completely mastered, but it's something I've been perfecting for my whole adult life really. And now I also feel very accomplished if I can look back and do the same in MMA.
Yeah, definitely. So far, you have a really impressive record. You're 4-0 with all wins coming by first-round submission. Which of those 4 wins so far has been the most satisfying?
I mean, they all hold their meaning. Nothing personal with any of my opponents. It's just I can't really say. It's hard to say. I guess let me see. I think there was probably 1 or 2. I made a few mistakes. I can look back and go, oh, yeah, I really dropped the ball on that one. But, I can't really point anyone out. They were all good. I learned something from every single one of them. Yeah,
as far as MMA goes, you have a lot of these peer grapplers coming over. Braulio just, came and had a successful MMA debut, and you have guys like Paul Harris who are kind of doing both. And if I'm not mistaken, you trained Belcher for the leg attacks of Paul Harris. And I just wanted to ask you about that, about your take on how well he did, and what you were drilling in his mind when you were training him for that.
Well, no, I'm good friends with Belcher. Whenever he's in Vegas, he always comes to the gym. We always train together. I didn't help him for that specific fight. We've trained a whole bunch. Whenever he's in town, he always comes over, and we always pick each other's brains. But for that fight, I didn't really help him. But I think he did really well. I think he was prepared, and not to discredit Pajares in any way, but Alan Belcher came ready. I think that Pajares was dealing with people that really weren't doing their homework when it came to footlocks, and Alan Belcher took that fight very seriously and did his homework, and it showed. He was going back and forth with Pajares, which something surprised everyone, including me. Pajares is deadly with those heel hooks, and but Belcher hung in there the whole time, so props to him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the biggest win of his career, and I think everybody was super impressed. Even Chael was giving him praise on the Rogan podcast. But kind of a question. You've trained with Forrest Griffin, correct?
Yes.
Are you going to be helping him train for his upcoming fight against Sonnen?
I haven't spoken with him in about a week. But I guess so. He's always been pretty consistent in the gym. We're good friends, and I consider him to be not only I guess it's not just really a coach or student relationship. It's more of a friend and training partner relationship. So I'm happy to help him. So if he comes by, we can go over some tapes and really break this fight down.
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely going to need to work on his guard game for that fight, because I'm sure he will hit the mat at some point going up against Chael Sonnen.
Yeah, and but you know what? Again, as much as I like Chael, he's got most of his losses throughout his career from guard. So he is dominant in that position. It's at the same time probably his strongest position, but his Achilles heel, because that's where he lost most of his fights. So it goes both ways.
Yeah, definitely. Robert, judging by your current record, we will probably see you in more prestigious organizations soon, and hopefully one day we'll see you in the UFC. For me, it'd be a dream match to see you fight Vinny Magalhaes in an MMA match, but if you could choose one dream opponent, who would it be?
It's hard. It's tough to say. People take it like it's personal, but I can't really think of anyone that I would want to fight. There are people I think that are good matchups for me. I think that there are people out there with big names that I can see myself fighting and doing well, but I don't necessarily think it's not necessarily someone I really want to fight that guy. I think a fighter should be ready to fight whomever. But I can think of a few guys out there, I would really like to fight.
I'm nowhere near the level of the top UFC players, but, it doesn't hurt to say. But I would like to fight a guy like John Jones one day. I would like to fight Anderson Silva one day. So if you're going to pick, if I could choose anyone, I'm going to aim for the stars. I'm going to fight the best guys out there.
Definitely. So, you mentioned Anderson Silva. Are you definitely dead set at fighting at 200 pounds the rest of your career, or could you maybe see yourself dropping down to middleweight at some point?
I could see. Look, it's something I'd consider dropping down to middleweight, but
it's hard, man. I tried once and I was miserable. My natural weight is 225, and I'm pretty lean at that weight, so I can make the 185 cut, but I'd prefer not to.
Definitely, and I was reading to get back to grappling. I was reading a interview you did a couple months back, and it was a pretty interesting quote. I was wondering if you maybe could expound upon a little bit. Someone asked you. Which was your favorite out of gi and no gi, and your response was gi is like an Xbox 360, whereas no gi is more like playing an Atari. Could you expand on that a little bit?
I think what I meant is that the possibilities with the gi are far much broader. Like they're endless essentially. So in Atari you get 2 buttons, Xbox you get 8 buttons. But, I thought people got offended by that, and they thought that I was, putting no gi down, and I loved it. In fact, I've done most of my training with the gi. But back in the day in Brazil, people in Brazil don't like to train no gi, by the way, and gi is far more popular over there. I was a no gi guy. I was the guy that was always pushy to have no gi classes when no one wanted to train no gi. So, it's not that I dislike. I love them both equally. There I go back and forth. If I train too much no-gi, I prefer gi and vice versa. Right now I train with gi once a week. That's it. That's what I do. But I think it's just it's more from a grappling perspective, not from an MMA fight perspective, from the art of submission. The gi is just more technical, and there are far more options. And that's what makes, I think, that overall, and I run a gym, so I can say this, I start out my classes were 50% gi, 50% no-gi. And then there was a shift, because the gi classes were always bigger, there was a shift 60-40, and now 70-30, probably 80-20 now. Most people prefer the gi. If people that grapple both, they tend to prefer the gi a little bit more. People that only, the first year or 2 years of their career, all they do is grapple no gi, then they'll never touch the gi because they're just so used to not having one on. But, I recommend both, even for MMA purposes. I tell my guys to put on the gi once a week, get a good grind with the gi, because at the end of the day, it's more technical.
Definitely. So talking about training, do you solely train at Drysdale Jiu-Jitsu, or will you float around and visit other places in the Las Vegas area?
I used to spar extreme couture. My jiu-jitsu was, when I opened my gym, it was just straight out jiu-jitsu. Now we've been gravitating towards a complete MMA gym. Now we have MMA classes, we have wrestling classes, Muay Thai, jiu-jitsu gi, jiu-jitsu no-gi. We have strength and conditioning. So because of sparring sessions, because we offer everything, I just stay at my place. And it's starting to pick up. We're starting to, kind of develop our own MMA team.
Yeah, and Robert, definitely thank you for spending 15, 20 minutes with you. I know you're a super busy guy, both managing your own fight career and managing your own gym. We have one more question for you. We ask every fighter. It's a pretty serious question, but I'll let Chris take it away.
Man, that's a lot of hype. Not serious at all. Robert, you can tell a lot about a guy by what kind of ice cream he likes. Chris Lieben says he likes bubble gum and ghetto flavors. Charlie Brenneman likes just plain old vanilla. What is Robert Drysdale's favorite ice cream?
John Anik's lactose intolerant. How sad is that? Sorry.
Man, I like them all, but if I had to choose one, probably chocolate mint.
Chocolate mint. I think Darren Cruikshank is in the same boat with you there.
Yeah, both classy guys.
Very classy guys. And Robert, thank you so much. You are an immensely busy guy, and we are really grateful you taking the time out to chat with us for a little bit.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Anytime, guys. Anytime, just let me know. And, thanks for listening.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, man.
All right, have a good one.
And definitely follow Robert at Robert Drysdale on Twitter. If you're still on the line, you have any more shout-outs to throw out there?
Just follow me on Twitter, like you said, at Robert Drysdale. Visit my website, drysdaljujitsu.com. I just want to thank Hayabusa, my sponsor, and whoever for the listeners, you guys ever come out to Vegas, want to do some training, come over to the gym. We're not political about training. It's about, having fun and enjoying a good session.
You have a opponent scheduled yet for the future, or is that still out there?
We're talking about a fight in November now. No opponent yet, but another fight, Legacy, November.
All right, we will keep our eyes on it and let our people know when you're fighting next. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And
I hope he brings an arm home, in his next fight. Keep those wins coming. Keep on tapping them out.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, I say it every time, but it really bears repeating. People who aren't fans of mixed martial arts think these guys are human cockfighters, think they're just savages. Literally every single person we've had on the podcast has been extremely friendly, been very, very, very intelligent. I mean, these are all, guys with way above average IQs. They've and Drysdale especially, he's one of the best American jiu-jitsu artists in the entire country. I guess I already said American, so that's a little repetitive there, but an extremely cerebral fighter, which you've got to be if you want to get to the grappling credentials that he achieved, and it's going to be really interesting. I've got my eyes on guys like Drysdale, guys like Braulio, who are making that transition to jiu-jitsu and MMA. I'm really curious to see where their careers lead to.
Yeah, and these guys are bona fide, true, top 10 grapplers, Braulio and Drysdale. You look at a guy like Damian Maia, and he had 5 fights in a row, submission of the nights, and he just looked like he was going to set the world on fire. So just seeing these guys come in with the credentials that they have, it's a good time to be a fan, and if you're a fan of grappling, you have a lot to look forward to with these gentlemen. Yeah,
and it seems like, the cream of the crop at 205 really are mostly striking experts, so it's going to be really interesting seeing guys like Drysdale, guys like Magalhães, who are expert grapplers, get thrown in there. And Drysdale coaches such a big slew of UFC fighters. From Frank Mir, like you mentioned, Forrest Griffin. It sounded like Team Alpha Male, probably all 6 of them jumped into a Toyota Prius or something and scooted over to Vegas to train with Drysdale. He really, really trains a lot of dudes.
I just had a thought the entire time he was talking about those guys, Dillashaw and Benavidez.
And we have a caller we'll get to in 1 second. Sorry, I'll let you finish your thought.
No problem. I was just going to say that it's ironic that, he trains those guys because I could just see him in the class. Everyone's warmed up. He's like, all right, everybody, we're going to work on guillotines. And Team Alpha Male just rolls their eyes.
Oh, God. Yeah, we actually have a caller. If you want to call in, we're 646-378-1046. But, hey there, it's a 209 area code, home of Nick Diaz. Who do we have on the line?
This is Joe in 209.
Joe in 209. What's going on, man?
Hey, I got a problem with tough noobs. Can I air it on the radio?
With tough noobs? Yeah, for sure.
No one is mentioning the last time that a lighter weight guy stepped up in weight class and actually won a title in a different division, and no one's talking about it, and I think it's because these tough noobs have short memories.
Definitely. Most guys now are stepping down. You rarely see dudes stepping up. But a guy like Sonnen, it was such a strange case to see a guy not only step up and get a title shot, but step up and not even have a fight at his new division before getting a title shot. What scenarios did you have in mind exactly?
Matt Hughes, BJ Penn.
Matt Hughes versus BJ Penn. Yeah, that was definitely a little while back, but yeah, that was really a moment where the UFC was starting to get its ground under it and start taking off.
And the sad part is nobody's mentioned it.
Yeah, that's true. Well, there's a lot going on right now, man. We got to look at cowards. They're putting a lot more emphasis on cowards right now than they are on heroes, because I mean, you know, a lot of the news is about Jones ducking Sonnen, Machida ducking Jones, Shogun ducking Jones. So it's easier to look at a mudslinging campaign than it is, you know, to really just appreciate the guys who actually do go out there and put it on the line at any time.
Exactly. You had so many more people talking about the fact that John Jones pulled out of the fight or didn't take the fight, and really the story there was that Sonnen was stepping up and immediately fighting a guy who was bona fide, bigger, stronger, faster, more athletic than him.
Well, my beef is that no one used that as an example. That's my beef, because no one even brought it up as an example of what could have happened.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there have been so many instances of people moving up and moving down. I'm sure it popped in a few people's heads, but this, I think, was more of a story of the fight not actually coming to fruition. But I definitely agree that Sonnen was very valiant to step up. What do you think about Jones not taking the fight?
Geez, I really don't care. I would have liked to have seen the fight. It would have been interesting. It would have sold a lot more pay-per-views than Vitor Belfort, but then again, Vitor Belfort, in my opinion, hits just as hard as Dan Henderson, if not harder, so that's another curious factor.
Yeah, that was my next question for you, man. How batshit crazy will you be going if Vitor just starts to swarm on John Jones and rips the title out of that guy's hands?
Completely. And in my opinion, I think Vitor Belfort has a better head kick than Rashad Evans. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, he does. We rarely see him, but he's been using him a lot more since he came over to the UFC. And I give him a puncher's chance in this fight, man.
Yeah, I mean, Evans probably throws his head kick with just as much of a wallop as Vitor, except the difference is Vitor stays in the pocket when he throws it, and he's ready to catch something afterwards. With Evans, he throws such a funky head kick, he's entirely off balance when it lands, and it takes a second afterwards for him to regain his balance and get back in a proper position.
Torque, son. Torque.
He's got mass torque. Yeah, anything else you wanted to touch on, Joe, from the 209?
No, I just saw there was a posting on Facebook. You guys are online, so I just wanted to check it out really quick. I call in to say hello. Definitely,
yeah. We air every Wednesday night from 9 to 11 Eastern Time, and I guess that's 6 to 8 your time out in California. Our co-host Chris is out in California, too, so y'all can go have ice cream or have a Brazilian barbecue or something.
Yeah, maybe we can go hang out sometime, Joe. Give me your digits.
But I've invited him to my comedy shows, but he's never been available.
Yeah, I don't have a car, Joe. I don't like to say that on air, but
I live in my mom's basement. Yeah, if you go back and listen to the Mark Hominick podcast, Hominick gave Chris quite a bit of shit. Even though he doesn't live in his mom's basement, he rents an apartment that he pays half of with his mom. He kind of exaggerated and said he lived in his mom's basement, and Mark Hominick refused to let that go, all because Chris fucked up a Great Lake. You never fuck up a Great Lake with a Canadian. Never.
No. For a beady-eyed Canadian, he's pretty mean.
Really, Mark Hominick had a beef with you living in your mom's apartment, considering his head's big enough where he actually rented someone in his apartment? Please.
Well, we didn't want to say much. The whole interview started pretty shittily, as like a few minutes before we were going to have him on, he sends me a DM on Twitter like, "Hey, I'm not at home. Call my cell phone." And we were actually doing a late podcast that night. I didn't see it. I rang his home 3 times, and it's like 10:30, 11 where he lives. And then all of a sudden I get a call from another number and answer it, and it's like, hey, it's Mark. My wife and baby are sleeping at home, and you're blowing up my house phone, and my wife's texting me really angry. Like, oh God, we're going to die from the fists of Mark Hominick. This is horrible. But
if you think it couldn't get worse, while he's dealing with all that, I'm talking about taking a shit at work, and he said he and all of his training partners and friends were listening to it at this other house.
It was a good shit, though.
Yeah.
Sounds brilliant to me.
From what I remember, you have any good poops lately, Joe?
It's not like I want to discuss it. All I know is that if Mark Hominick has a kid, I'll tell you this much, though. If it was like Alienation, oh, my gosh, like that kid could be born inside Mark Hominick's head. That's how big it is.
What?
And the hematoma that Jose Aldo gave him?
It would pop out like an alien.
Yeah, I wish I were referring to that, but I'm literally referring to his big, giant head.
No, I mean, he probably could have had like at least a 4-month-old fetus in that hematoma.
I'll do you one better. You ever seen Independence Day? Remember that little alien was in that dude's head? Like, Mark Hominick got one of those up there.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, tweet at him, Joe, and put hashtag basement forever or something like that. He'll know.
Yeah, hashtag he's going to knock me out if he ever sees me. How about that?
Hashtag I'm dead. And let's all hope that Mark Hominick doesn't listen to this podcast. But, yeah, Joe, thank you very much for calling in. If you ever have anything else you want to bring up or talk about or join in the conversation when we're discussing anything, feel free.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And, yeah, that was Joe from the 209. But, yeah, I guess let's hop back on this UFC 151.
Hold on, real quick. I just want to throw something out there. I know Joe personally. I didn't know he was going to be calling in. He's a stand-up comedian out in the Bay Area. So if you ever want a really good laugh that's pop culture based and MMA based, check out Joe Rivera. He's doing big things
nice.
out there. So check him out.
I thought I was talking to a complete stranger there. It's awesome.
Nope.
Yeah.
No strangers want to talk to us. We're creeps.
We are creepy. Yeah, so I guess let's hop back on UFC 151, which was far and away the biggest story. I guess when Robert called us up, we were talking about Dana White, and if you haven't seen the fight cancellation video, it's amazing. He's so pissed. Everyone loves a pissed off Dana White, and like I mentioned with Robert, he called Greg Jackson a fucking sport killer. Greg Jackson says, I'm not trying to ruin the sport, which, yeah, we know you're not outright trying to ruin the sport, but nonetheless, you're ruining the sport, I don't think Jackson's, at Jackson's in Albuquerque, he and Winklejohn are, like, standing in a really tall room observing everyone.
It's a smoky room, and they have steam whistles blasting and Nazi fucking shit.
Yeah. I really don't picture Jackson trying to ruin the sport. I don't think anyone thinks he's going up to his fighters and says, this is how we will take down the sport of MMA. But, yeah, no one thinks that. But, so many of the past controversies have been in Greg Jackson's hands, from the Clay Guida, doing his Caleb Starnes impression, from this whole John Jones thing, from the Nick Diaz Carlos Condit fight, and this has all been in the past year. Jackson's really not making any fans, and Dana White actually called on all reporters to stop interviewing Greg Jackson, which is obviously just going to lead to more people wanting to interview Greg Jackson because it makes a story. But, yeah, Dana is not very happy with Greg Jackson, and you could imagine why.
That's like when your parents tell you that the cookies are off limits in the cookie jar, and you're always just fucking sneaking in, grabbing a cookie.
I'm sure Greg Jackson's parents, after a while, realized that their son wasn't, he wasn't fit enough to have the cookie jar.
That's the thing. A guy like Greg Jackson takes a cookie, and he takes out all the sugar and all the chocolate and all of the dough. You're just left with a watery, floury mess in a pan.
Yeah, I want to say that Greg Jackson's favorite ice cream flavor.
Water.
Watery. Just a frozen block of
ice.
Just a frozen block of ice in a cone. Greg Jackson's favorite ice cream flavor. Thank you for saving me there, because really I was thinking of like, what is the least desirable ice cream, and I couldn't think of a non-desirable ice cream other than poor John Anik, whose answer was literally hot dog, because he's lactose intolerant. Every time his family went to the Dairy Queen, he had to eat a hot dog. But yeah, big shout out to John Anik, who we had on our last episode. If you haven't listened to that, definitely go back and listen. We probably talked to him for 30-40 minutes, talked about everything from his stint on Bellator to what it's like doing the UFC, what it's like recording his cards. It was pretty interesting. The thing that really kind of surprised me most about that is Anik and Florian do a lot of these FX cards and, these non-Fox, non-pay-per-view cards, which include commercials, and I had no idea that for the international broadcast, they actually don't stop. They keep on talking while the American audience is seeing commercials, because in these international markets, they aren't broken up by commercials, which really kind of angers me, because part of the show is seeing the walkout, seeing what song these guys come out to, more importantly, hearing a background on them, hearing what Anik's got to say, hearing what Florian's got to say, and unfortunately we never hear that because they're cutting the commercial.
Anik is, I want to say, the most well-spoken guy in MMA. I mean, he was just shooting facts off and tying everything together, and he didn't stumble once. The guy's a real pro, and it was an honor having him on.
Anik was on our show, and we had prepared questions. We were the ones who were supposed to be running the interview, but we probably sounded like blabbering idiots compared to Anik. We would be talking to him like, hey, Mr. Anik, what sorts of things, and he would just fire off with what sounded like a prepared 2-paragraph statement, adding, it was
poetry. While we were like, yeah, definitely, it is what it is.
Cha.
Yeah.
Cha. What is your favorite ice cream, brah? Cha.
Ow, you're lactose. Oh, yeah, it is what it is.
Cha. But yeah, John was a really great interview, and yeah, it's really been awesome that I think now out of 13, 14 guests, every single person we've had on has been just remarkably friendly, remarkably well spoken. And that, along with the support we've gotten from listeners, we're averaging about 1,000 listeners a episode, which is mind blowing to me. So we thank you all first and foremost, and thank the fighters who come on and give us their time.
And thank you very much to Anthony from Chicago for calling in during the Eddie Bravo podcast. Thank you for doing that. And Joe Rivera. He actually just tweeted at us at the MMA Podcast. Thanks for letting me talk. Never thought I'd be riffing Mark Hominick jokes off the cuff, ? So follow Joe. He's at Joe Rivera, Rivera 82. And just one more Twitter-related thing. Bjorn Rebney just tweeted, rolled with Ben Askren tonight. Unfortunately, we weren't negotiating or he'd own the company. Wow.
Yeah, Askren's a guy. When Dana White reached into Bellator and grabbed Jay Heron to fight Jake Ellenberger, a lot of people felt like that grab would have been for Ben Askren, but he makes John Fitch look like John Jones. Askren is just so incredibly, you can't really blame him because he wins fights, but he has so many opportunities where he has a chance to really get in and make a move. and and he doesn't. I just got sent a picture from Chris of what looks like a horribly deformed person, and Chris says, "This is what I think Ben Askren looks like." Who is that a picture of exactly?
This is a movie titled Mask from the late 70s about a guy who had a skull that never stopped growing. So that's what I think Ben looks like.
That is pretty disturbing, actually. That is borderline disturbing. But yeah, that was definitely fun having John Anik on. But yeah, I guess we only have a couple more points to bring up about UFC 151. It was canceled, and really you can't blame Dana White for canceling it once John Jones pulled out of the card, refusing to fight Chael Sonnen at UFC 151, because you can't have UFC 151 have the main fight featuring Jay Heron, a guy who hasn't even fought in the UFC in a pretty long-ass time, have Seaver versus Yegan be a co-main. I mean, not to take away from these guys, but they aren't main event co-main material. Yeah, I'm looking now. Heron hasn't fought in the UFC since 2004. No, actually, 2005, a loss against Jonathan Goulet.
He's actually on a pretty impressive run, though. I think
definitely he's 11-1. His only loss coming to Ben Askren, and that was by split decision.
And that was very close. That was actually a 5-round war, and it was the only time that someone actually made Ben Askren fight. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do against Ellenberger. I'll have to say that if they do end up fighting, if he can make it out of that first round against Ellenberger, he's golden.
Yeah, they actually are scheduled to fight October 5th at UFC on FX5, Travis Brown versus Bigfoot. All of the fights have been moved. I'll recap them real quick. Jones-Henderson, obviously, Henderson was replaced by Vitor Belfort. They'll fight at UFC 152. There have been 4 fights moved to UFC on FX5 on October 5th. Those fights are Ellenberger Heron, Dennis Hallman, Thiago Tavares, Michael Johnson versus Danny Castillo, and Shane Roller versus Jacob Volkman. Most of those will break down the week before the fight. Also, a few fights got moved to UFC on Fuel TV, Lee versus Franklin, which is going to be on November 10th. And those 2 fights are John Lineker versus Yasuhiro Urushitani, the 4th guy, the very lesser-known guy in that 4-man
Asian who got knocked out
flyweight tournament. Yep. And we also have Takeya Mizugaki, who could go by the same moniker, facing Jeff Hoagland, a guy who we've actually had on the podcast, and we hope to
Hellbound.
Yeah, Hellbound. And we hope to talk to him before he fights again. And we had 2 fights moved to UFC on Fox, Henderson versus Diaz, which, with all this shittiness coming up in the UFC world, that's going to be such a great card. Bendo versus Nate Diaz, Shogun versus Gustafsson, BJ versus Rory McDonald, and the other fight moved to that card was the 2 fights were Tim Means and Abel Trujillo, and Henry Martinez versus the MMA Podcast alumnus Darren Cruikshank. We hope Darren Cruikshank does well at that one. And Kyle Noak, Charlie Brenneman also. We had 3 guys on this card who have been alumni of the podcast. They're also moving to UFC 152 with the Jones-Belfort fight. The only fight still left to be moved is Seaver versus Yegan, which, an interesting note, Brenneman actually said that the UFC was not reimbursing them at all for changing up the fights. And Brenneman brought up a pretty valid point. He said it's going to cost maybe in excess of $1,000 because he himself bought a ticket, his cornerman bought a ticket, his wife bought a plane ticket, his family bought plane tickets. They were making arrangements to come to Las Vegas for UFC 151, which was supposed to be in 3 days on September 1st. And, they make arrangements, and the UFC kind of pulls the rug out from under them. Obviously, it's really good of them that they schedule them for fights in the next couple months. But kind of sucks for a guy like Brenneman who isn't exactly, pulling in six figures every fight, and it's, not easy to just lose $1,000 for nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like taking a double-barrel shotgun, getting your foot blown off, and then they come up and spray alcohol in it to sanitize it. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it's all good. You're scheduled for a fight, but what about all these costs that, you're now out, and then you were looking forward to income, which you now no longer have. And I want to make an interesting parallel. Dana White drives, awesome cars. His son was at the Fantasy Factory. He jet sets all over the place. He's rich as shit, and so are the Fertitta brothers. They could easily go out of their way to help these people, but they're not doing it, and it doesn't make sense. And the parallel to that is the owners of the theater that I work at, the Golans. They pull in $800,000 after costs every single year for this theater, and yet day by day, this place falls apart. Speakers stop working. The drinking fountains don't work. So, I mean, yeah, you can rake in money and all that, but cracks are going to start showing, man, and this is one of those times. It's really an ugly thing to see a very, very fortunate company not go out of their way to help fighters that they fucked over.
Yeah, and when they took out health insurance policies for all the fighters, I think that was a huge step forward. I don't think this is as big of a step back, but it's still a little step back. It's still just like you said, an extremely, extremely profitable company, not really looking out for the best interests of their fighters, which, I guess maybe their argument is that the UFC isn't your only source of income. You have sponsorship deals and what have you. But, for main event guys, this isn't going to hurt bad. This obviously doesn't hurt John Jones. But for guys like a Charlie Brenneman, who actually came out, it was either today or yesterday, and made these statements, he said, not only am I losing this money, but I was physically priming myself to fight in 3 days, and now I have to fight in 3 days and a month and a half.
It's just aggravating, man. It's aggravating. This whole thing could have been avoided if a couple things were done differently. The fans are without a pay-per-view, and the next one that they have coming up is much more subpar. I mean, Belfort Jones, come on. Well, we all gave Henderson a shot. I mean, Belfort doesn't even fight in the division anymore. And then you have all these fighters that are out, and then you have, Jones being a prima donna. It just sucks, man. It plain sucks. And I hope that there's measures put in place to make sure this never happens again.
Definitely, and to get off the point really quick, Jesus Christ, Mike Swick just tweeted, Phil Baroni just made weight, 22 pounds in 24 hours. The last 24 hours, Phil Baroni has been on the pace of losing a pound an hour. That is not got to be good for you.
Wow, and you know what? He's known as a partier too, so his liver is probably shot.
Yeah, but so is the life of a fighter. Rogan said on different occasions it would be so much better for these people's health if they just made an agreement to get to a point where you could cut weight and make it to the desired weight, but you don't, because you would be in much healthier shape. This just fucks people's liver over. But when it gets to competitions that are this competitive and mean this much for both money, for pride, for standing in your weight class, there's really no such thing as a gentleman's agreement.
I have no disagreements there.
But yeah, so to pop back over to 151, I feel like actually if Josh Koscheck hadn't pulled out of this fight against Jake Ellenberger, the card probably wouldn't have been canceled. Ellenberger-Koscheck isn't the best main event in the entire world, but it's marketing unlike a Huron Ellenberger. You can't sell Huron Ellenberger and expect people to spend $60 on that.
Yeah, it forces people to find other means of, watching it, and I don't condone that. I've never done that.
We would never condone such a thing on the MMApodcast.com.
No, not at all. So, get your shit together, Dana and crew, and stop charging $45 per event And Rogan
60.
says, 60. Rogan says that it's necessary because there's so much that goes into it, and if they lowered it any amount, then they'd, then they wouldn't be able to afford it. Bullshit. You get more advertising, plain and simple. Like, I don't get that.
I would argue, if you cut the price in half to $30 a pay-per-view, I mean, obviously, it's simple economics. You lower the price, more people are going to buy it. I feel like $60 is a pretty significant price point. It's pretty high, especially for a product that comes along every couple weeks. People, I know a lot of UFC fans, especially going through the MMA playground, having friends I've gotten into the sport, people I've met over the years who are into the sport. I've not met a single person who orders every single UFC. I know a lot of people who watch every single UFC, whether they go out to a bar and watch it, whether they'll go to a friend's and themselves and 5 friends will pitch every now and then, whether they do the dastardly deed of watching it illegally online through a stream. But I have a feeling like if you dropped it to something reasonable, whether that was $29.99, whether that was $19.99, you would have people who would buy every single event. Shit, I might even do it. If it was $20 a card, I would strongly think about buying a season pass. Offer up a season pass, and you could charge as much as $300 for it. And I feel like a lot of people would jump on that, but because the price is so steep, you have a lot of people going to a bar or going online to watch an illegal stream or finding other means other than buying a $60 pay-per-view. Every UFC fan that I know either just won't order the pay-per-views or they'll order a pay-per-view one in every blue moon. But, I mean, you would have had to literally spend over $1,000 to buy every pay-per-view in 2011, and that is insane.
I agree 100%. The last pay-per-view I ever bought was UFC 111. I was so pumped to see St. Pierre, come in there and destroy Dan Hardy, and most of the card was just absolutely lackluster, and I had spent $60 on every single pay-per-view from UFC, I want to say 90 to 111, just about. Now think about how much money that is. That's
22 events times 60. That's what, 20 times 60. That's
1,200.
Yeah. So what? That's 1,300. No. Yeah. That's $1,320.
Yeah. I dumped that into that, and then at that point I was just like, you know what? I can go out to the bar, or I can just go over to a friend's house to watch it. Cause
you could buy a satellite for $1,300.
An old decommissioned Russian satellite.
Nonetheless, a satellite.
Yeah, it's correct. And you know what? A wise man once said, take your abuse out on a woman, not a poor defenseless animal. And I agree with that 100%.
A very, very wise man said that. Probably the wisest man. I think it was Jesus Christ. It's not a good thing with that. But to hit those last parts of UFC 151. Now we have John Jones versus Belfort. We've talked about the stylistic matchup. Kind of an interesting point. Las Vegas has John Jones as a 13-1 favorite. He's minus 1,300.
Woo!
Yeah, which is a giant line. I've honestly, I don't know if I've ever seen a line that skewed, which literally means if you bet $13 on John Jones, you only make $1 on profit. You bet 13, they give you back 14. That's it. He is a giant favorite. His camp's actually a little curious as to why he's such a extreme favorite, which I think he has a puncher's chance. I think he has better odds than that. But I still think Jones is a really steep favorite. Actually, Belfort joined the Black Zillions to prepare for this.
Yeah, I saw a training video. I'll send you a link, dude. He's training with Alistair, Melvin, Tyrone Spong, Rashad Evans, and he's taking it seriously, man. So I think you and me should dump some money on it. What do you think on Belfort?
Why not, man? Yeah, and for the outlook of Jon Jones. Dana White said that Henderson will probably face the winner of this. Whether it's Jones or Belfort, the next title shot will come from Henderson. And I'm assuming because Lyoto Machida was slated to get a title shot after Henderson, he's next in line, but you never know what Dana White will say, because you know what? He technically got his title shot, and he was scheduled to fight Jon Jones, and he pulled out of it. A title shot doesn't necessarily mean you fight the champion. It means you get a chance to fight the champion. You get a shot at the champion, and Lyoto had a shot.
He got his shot already. I mean, and he looked not so great in doing it. So I think that's why we were so excited about Dan Henderson, the man who dethroned Fedor and, you know, ran through, you know, Shogun and all these other people. You know, he has the chance. He's better now than he's ever been. Earlier in his career, he was known as Decision Dan.
Now he has the single strongest punch in the sport.
Absolutely, I agree. He proved that time and time again, and that's why it was so interesting to see this 41-year-old warrior go out against the young lion, and now we're not going to get that. And on top of that, Dan Henderson now has to wait even longer to come back and fight. He hasn't fought since November 2011. So I really honestly want to see him get a tune-up fight before he fights Jon Jones, because I don't see how it's going to be positive to have a year-and-a-half-long layoff and then fight the king at 205.
I totally agree. You know, I would say probably that Dan Henderson's right hand ranks up there in the top weapons in mixed martial arts of all time. It ranks up there with the Mirko Krokop head kick, with the Hoist Gracie submissions and chokes, with the Muay Thai knees of Vanderlei Silva, or the deadly kicks of Anderson Silva. I mean, those five would probably be the most deadly weapons in MMA history. So if you're talking about the amount of power one guy can wallop into a punch, we're looking at something historic. We're looking at a guy you have never seen a guy put as much power as Dan Henderson puts into that right hand. And if you don't believe me, I have a little GIF picture of Dan Henderson versus Michael Bisping. Watch that a few times, and then we should be on the same level.
Yeah, there's no arguing. I mean, there was a breakdown by Bloody Elbow by a guy named Dallas. I can't remember his last name, but
Diamond Dallas Page.
Yeah. DDH or DDP.
DDH.
Yeah. DDH. Yeah, my spelling not so good today, but he has a couple striking manuals where he breaks down all the really big time techniques in MMA by some of the most prominent fighters. He broke down Dan Henderson and his striking style with frozen pictures and GIFs, and it's amazing to see how right he was, dude. Dan Henderson always has his weight loaded on that back leg, and he's always turned nearly sideways because all he wants to do is uncork that right hand, and he's got a mean left hook to back up the right hand. He KO'd Vanderlei Silva with the left hook, so it's not like he doesn't have any power in that left, but that right is a fucking bomb.
Definitely. And to kind of wrap up, UFC 151 put a pretty bow on it. You know, Jon Jones is wondering why he's getting all of this heat, and yet again he makes a decision that fans aren't gonna like. He retweets a guy saying, "Hendo injured 3+ weeks ago. Who carries the blame now?" Jon Jones retweets that and then follows that up with, "I'm glad you guys are opening up your eyes." Yeah, because Dan Henderson is to blame because he got injured, and you're not to blame because you turned down a fight. Like I said before, when you get an injury, it's not just, "Oh, I'm injured, I'm out of the fight, I can't fight, I got to call Dana White right now, give me my phone." No, it's you're injured, and you feel it out. You wait. You know, am I going to be able to fight like this? What are the pros? What are the cons? And obviously Dan Henderson wanted to fight, so he wanted to give his knee a chance to recover. No one knows if he had X-rays. A lot of people are saying he had a brace on, but Jones blames Dan Henderson and unfollows Dana White on Twitter, just acting like a complete baby.
Yes, and I'll quote a great man. I don't think you'll know who said this. It's kind of hard. It's very obscure, but the problem with John Jones's hands and his feet and his knees is that they're attached to a coward.
They're attached to a coward. See, read my book. Jesus Christ wrote the foreword to it.
No,
who was that guy? Can't remember him.
That would be the gangster from West Lynn himself, who I really hope we one day see fight John Jones. But there was a lot to talk about that. It's why we talked about it for an hour. But I guess if we're past the whole John Jones debacle, you want to dip our toes into the news?
Oh my God, I would love to.
Let's do that. And a lot coming down in the news. I guess we'll lead it off. Kind of a head scratcher. The MMA Underground is a site we definitely frequent. We've actually gotten a lot of listeners through the MMA Underground, especially when we posted up that link of Eddie Bravo talking about Joe Rogan. I think we got about 5,000 hits on YouTube, a lot of which were through the Underground. And the Underground absolutely exploded the other day because Dana White asked fans what they thought about bringing in Brock Lesnar and Fedor Emelianenko. Half of me thinks that Dana White's just being Dana White and fucking with people, but he definitely got quite a response from the Underground.
That he did, and it's weird that after all this time and all this Fedor hate and Brock isn't even relevant in MMA anymore, that he brings it up. It just doesn't have the same appeal that it used to have, man.
The fight literally, I'm not exaggerating, it would have been 10 times as big as far as, the gate, how many people buy it. It would have been one of the greatest fights of all time.
It would have been the biggest fight of all time. The biggest, the absolute biggest. I mean, I think it would have been bigger than Silverstone 2. Because you have Brock, who appeals to the non-diehard MMA fan. I mean, I remember I would take friends out to the UFC at the local bar, and their biggest thing they took out of it is, oh my God, that Brock Lesnar guy is a gorilla. He's crazy. What the hell? Lesnar is probably the best appeal to the casual fan the UFC has ever had, and bringing in Fedor Emelianenko, that would be the biggest draw to the hardcore fans. So it would be the perfect mix of a legend in Fedor Emelianenko, who has such a cult following within the diehard MMA community, and a guy like Brock Lesnar, who any sports fan would love to see fight a guy, just because he has that Hulk smash draw to him. But honestly, I doubt we'll ever see it happen. I kind of think Dana White was just fucking with people. He's gotta just want to get a little bit of chuckles in after this horrible week that he's had. Street cred.
A fight. But I don't see it happening. I don't see Brock Lesnar or Fedor Emelianenko ever fighting again in the UFC. In Brock's case again, in Fedor's case he never did. But I don't see that happening. But
can I be the tit to your tat? The yin to your yang?
Yin my yang. That sounds...
yin my dirty little yang. Here is the one reason why I will put an ounce of credibility into this. There has been a lot of card shifting. There's been a huge amount of just injuries and subpar pay-per-views. UFC 147, the Maynard Guida debacle. 149 was a stinker. So they're really struggling right now. They're at a plateau. And what better way to get yourself out of that than a giant fight that could perform? It could.
Yeah, the last 2 summers have been absolutely brutal for the UFC. Last summer, you had, it seemed like someone was getting injured on every card. You had the whole thing starting off with Marquardt getting pulled from the fight last second, and it being Story versus Brenneman, and then you had the thing with Brock Lesnar pulling out of his fight against Junior Dos Santos because he had his second bout of diverticulitis. I'm trying to think back. I'm actually going to check because it's bugging me now. I want to see exactly what those fights were. Yeah, 131 was Dos Santos versus Carwin. The next card you had Congo versus Barry. The next card we were going to see Rashad Evans versus Phil Davis. Davis pulled out and he fought Tito Ortiz instead. You had the Anderson Silva fight where he was scheduled to fight Yushin Okami in the main card, but every single fight on the prelim card was scrapped for some reason or another. You had UFC 130, which was originally supposed to be the third meeting between Edgar and Gray Maynard, and that got scrapped. Both guys ended up pulling out of that one. Just so many fights where we thought we were going to see one thing, and instead we saw another.
I can't wait till things turn around because it's a sport that I love.
And Shogun Jones actually kicked it off. Jones replaced an injured Rashad Evans and was put in there, and it was history from there. Sorry to cut you off.
That's all right. I was just going to say that I'd love to see them turn around, figure out what to do because they have a giant roster. The UFC roster is bigger than it's ever been. They're pulling in crazy talent, like Lombard and just all these guys are getting in here. And yet, time after time, we're seeing these just really bad cards. And I think it's because they're not doing the matchups that make sense. They're doing matchups that would draw. And that's the biggest fucking problem. And that's what boxing is going through and has been going through for a long time. It's the fights that need to happen don't get made because maybe people will be a little more excited about another matchup.
Mm-hmm.
And they're kind of falling into that hole right now, and I hope they realize that before it's too late because at this point, this is the tipping point. They can either go all the way downhill from here or they can change it up and make it something great. And let's hope that they do the latter.
And a perfect example is now you have Anderson Silva, who has a slew of middleweight contenders waiting to fight him, and the UFC is letting his management dictate who he wants to fight. And Anderson Silva's management doesn't want to fight anyone at welterweight or at middleweight at the moment. So literally, Anderson Silva at this point is waiting on George St. Pierre, because that's going to be a huge draw, which I think we probably can exclude from the argument of the UFC not putting together fights that need to be made, because I think a lot of people have been waiting on Anderson Silva versus George St. Pierre for a long time. And actually, Anderson Silva's management, kind of surprising, came out and said they wanted to fight GSP whether he loses to Condit or beats Condit. They want GSP next. So, all signs are pointing to early, maybe March, April 2013 scrap super fight between Anderson Silva and George St. Pierre, and that's it's been a rough summer for UFC fans, obviously, with it ending with a whole cancellation of a card. Anderson Silva George St. Pierre fight would be a nice treat to the MMA fans.
That's the super fight that we've been waiting for, and it's really 2010 if you look at it. That fight is so 2010.
So 2010.
It's lost its appeal a little bit considering the path that GSP has gone on. He's really just become more of a boring fighter, and Anderson's continuing his dominance. I think Anderson's too big for him, and I agree with you that management dictating fights is retarded, because that's yet again a boxing thing. This is their company. It's not a co-promotion. This is the UFC. They hold all the cards, and just because you've been a god in MMA for years doesn't mean you get to go, no, I don't want to fight him. I want to fight him. He does not deserve the shot. Okay, with guys like, the middleweight division a year ago was cleaned out. Everyone said it was the weakest division in the UFC. Now you got Weidman, you got Belcher, You got Tim Bosch. You got Brian Stann and Bisping. Like, you can't make that excuse anymore. He's got a ton of fights ahead of him, and I'd really want to go ahead and just say that it's a thing that we won't know. His management knows that we don't, which is he's probably just not looking so great anymore. He's probably getting older. He's 37 years old. The first thing to go when you're a fighter is speed. Last thing is power. Yeah, and Anderson isn't even known as a power puncher. So when he loses that speed, it's all downhill from here. And I think they want to protect his legacy. And you know what? I don't really blame him. Let him go out with a win over GSP, and he probably retires after that. I could see that happening.
I could see that happening too, but something that kind of caught my attention. The other big super fight on the radar, because easily the top 3 fighters in the world right now are George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva, and John Jones, going up from lightest to heaviest. Anderson Silva is really the only guy who could fight either one. No one's even, mentioning the possibility of GSP versus John Jones, because that would never happen. But a lot of people are talking about GSP Silva and Silva versus Jones. Silva and Jones have repeatedly said they won't fight each other. They respect each other too much. We've never really heard one fighter talk bad about the other one, and everyone just kind of assumed they would never fight each other because they were such big fans of one another, and they didn't want to mess up each other's legacy. Well, after this whole 151 debacle, Silva's been talking a little bit of shit about John Jones, and that's all it takes. It only takes one person to throw out some incendiary stuff. What? Yeah, it only takes one person to throw out some incendiary stuff, and the other person gets mad, and all of a sudden they're willing to fight one another. Silva actually said 2 different things. First, he said that if it was him, he would have taken the fight on 8 days' notice, no matter who the opponent. So basically, he was saying that he was a true warrior, and Jones isn't, saying he would have not done what Jones did. And then I think just yesterday, he came out saying he's going to be Vitor Belfort, someone who he had a long-time grudge against. I don't know if that still exists at all, but he first made it known that he would have handled the situation differently and said he was going to be rooting against John Jones. This coming from a friendship that had never had any bump in the road, things are starting to get a little bumpy.
And thank God, because it's so boring when everyone respects each other, you know what I mean?
I like you. I want to bring you to my barbecue. BJ Penn the best. He's the best. No, you're the best.
Yeah, like, I honestly think that John Jones has a little too many physical talents for Anderson to contend with, but I also think that if anyone out there would make a fight of it against John Jones, it's Anderson Silva, because John has a lot of holes in his striking game. He's a great wrestler. He's very creative, but he got that shit from Anderson Silva. Mm-hmm. So I think Anderson will be one step ahead, and maybe he gets weathered down and John does the Greg Jackson thing where you hold him down and wear him out and then beat him, but I think that's a fight that's much more intriguing than Silva GSP, in my opinion. I think GSP is just too small for Silva.
Yeah, and UFC 154 will be interesting. George St. Pierre, from what it sounds like, he's going to be fighting at UFC 154. It's been scheduled. It works out perfectly for George St. Pierre. He should be training by now. His knee's fully recovered, and he should be ready to fight by November 17th. The fight, of course, like many a George St. Pierre's fight, is conveniently scheduled at the Bell Center in Montreal, so he's going to have his home crowd behind him again. I believe he's had his home crowd behind him for 2 different fights. I think he was in Montreal for the second fight against Matt Serra, and I'm loading his Wikipedia now, which, of course, the one
UFC
time...
UFC 129 was in Toronto. That was in Toronto. Yep. So,
I'm looking at it now. His last 2 fights were both in Canada, UFC 129 and 124. His fight against Koscheck was in Montreal. Fight against Shields was in Ontario, and that fight against Serra was also in Montreal. So this will actually be his third UFC fight in Montreal. He fought.
Do you think that's unfair? Do you think that's unfair? Back fights with his hometown crowd, or do you think he's earned that as a long-standing champion?
I think part of it is him earning it, and I think part of it is, like you said about Joe Silva, matchmaking to get money instead of matchmaking to ensure extreme fairness. You know, a fight in Canada featuring George St. Pierre is going to sell out like that. So I think it's a thing of they want to fill up the Bell Center, and you really can't blame them. You look at the top gates in UFC history, it's like Canada, 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 Brazil, Canada. People come out to those fights in flocks. So he has such a big following. I think it's almost as much as the fans there being as impressive as George St. Pierre is.
I really think that for this next fight, they need to have, for the first time in the company's history, a musical opening where it's Deadmau5 playing in front of the Canadian crowd, and, you know, he just descends from the top of the rafters in a throne, just
Can I get a George St. Pierre impression of him on a DMA listening to Deadmau5?
I saw it. I love terror. I love dead mice.
Oh man, never failed. That's awesome. And UFC 154. Actually, the what should be a fight for number one contendership at welterweight, but might not be if Silva gets the next crack at George St. Pierre. Which, I mean, it sucks for Hendricks and Kampmann, who are probably, other than Condit and St. Pierre, at the top of their division. But in order to make a super fight, you know, you're always going to have a number one contender at every weight class. You're always going to have a guy who deserves a title shot. But in order to put together a super fight, you got to put those guys on hold for just a minute. And it's a fight like you said, we've literally been waiting for since 2010. So, yeah, we'll see St. Pierre Condit. We'll see Hendricks Kampmann at 154. We'll talk about Hendricks Kampmann if we have time to do it at the bottom of the show. But, yes, St. Pierre opens minus 350 versus Condit. Not a crazy line, but still a pretty significant one. And the question that's going to be on everyone's mind is how George St. Pierre recovers from that knee surgery.
Yeah, he's been training in anti-gravity machines, which I don't even know how that works. There's a video, 30-second video he posted on his Twitter where he's on this treadmill. And he's got his from his waist down is covered, and then you look inside and he's running on a treadmill, but apparently there's no gravity inside, so
yeah,
they
looks like
create
he's
a vacuum.
running like a Neil Armstrong, which, by the way, rest in peace. But, yeah, he's just, like, taking these strides that look like if he was running on land and not a treadmill, it'd be, like, 20 feet a stride, just, like, burn. Like your normal pace is step, 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 step. But he's, like, almost at a full sprint, and it's step, 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 step.
How can you expect to beat a guy who does gymnastics with the best of them, wrestles with the best of them, and trains in anti-gravity? You can't. You can't beat that guy.
They're actually going to have the entire ring be anti-gravity for George St. Pierre.
He's just pushing off of the cage like Thor. Ah!
Yeah, just a Superman punch all the way across the cage. But yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see if St. Pierre is able to beat a guy like Condit, and hopefully after this fight, which Silvercamp says they want GSP either way, it would honestly be a cleaner situation if GSP lost, because then you give the winner of Hendricks and Kampmann to the champion and Condit, and George St. Pierre can do whatever the hell he pleases to. But I don't think many people expect Condit to win that fight, even though George St. Pierre hasn't fought in a long time. Actually hasn't fought in so long. They don't have him on the welterweight rankings of Fight Matrix. They have Martin Kampmann as the number one welterweight. But,
I would love to see a fight where Greg Jackson is cornering both fighters. He's running back and forth between each side, and they're just coming in and one punch and then back out, circle away. One punch, like snakes, just.
Us. But I guess I would enjoy seeing that too.
I digress. I didn't mean I'd love to see it. I think it would be funny if that happened. There's the difference.
But let's. We have about 15 minutes left, so let's try and tackle a few more of these subjects. But before we do that, at the beginning of every month, we like to run a little segment called Fights We're Pumped For, where we accordingly talk about the three we're pumped for. But at the end of every month, with Beatdown of the Month, which is where we talk about the beating of the month. So I'll let you start that off, Chris. And before we start it off, let's get that Beatdown of the Month music going. I love how it goes off tune randomly. But I digress. Go ahead, man.
My beatdown of the month is definitely not the one I thought I would choose, but on short notice, the best I could come up with. Yushin Okami versus Buddy Roberts.
Oh, yeah.
Robert came in and nobody thought that he would do any good, and he proved that everyone was right with Okami just taking him down, sitting in full mount, breaking him to the point where the ref had to stop it. Now, was Roberts bloody and beaten and done? No, but it was pathetic. It really looked like my dad versus me when I was 6 years old. Just, no, quit hitting yourself.
Yeah, and my beatdown of the month, I actually have two different beatdowns of the month. The beatdown of the month that happened in the ring was Ronda Rousey against Sarah Kaufman. Holy shit, Sarah Kaufman. I don't know if Sarah Kaufman landed a punch the entire fight. Ronda Rousey swarmed in with punches, which I don't know if Kaufman expected. She immediately tied up with Kaufman, and when she tied up with Kaufman, you knew shit was over. Ronda Rousey wrapped up with her quick, taps her out in 52 seconds. Ronda Rousey still has yet to be in the second round of a fight. Every single win by first round submission, and I've said it before. We've seen people with these crazy records where they go, undefeated, every win's the first round submission, but then when they get in the elite ranks, they drop off. They can't keep it up. Ronda Rousey's already the champ. She's the best in the world, and she's still doing it. And with the exception of the Miesha Tate fight, every fight has been ended in a minute or less. That's insane. But that is my beatdown of the month in the cage. Really, my beatdown of the month is the MMA world against John Jones. When John Jones decided to turn down the fight against Chael Sonnen, the entire MMA world lashed out against him. Let me read some of these tweets. Dana White, this is one of those selfish, disgusting decisions, etc., etc. Bisbing, Jones said he's not fighting on 8 days' notice. I did. Just saying. T.J. Dillashaw, can't believe this whole show is canceled because of Jones. He should have to relinquish his belt. Michael Chiesa, Johnny Bones is a fraud. Vinny Magalise, how to ruin an entire event. Hashtag Bones knows. How to piss off Dana White. Hashtag Bones knows. Charlie Brenneman, me and Rick Story took a fight on 24 hours notice. Champ, what? Jeff Hoagland, a guy we've had on like Brenneman, consummate professional. Why am I not fighting? Please say it ain't so. I got bills to pay, UFC. Johnny Bones, can I at least get one of your new Nike t-shirts? I'll give it to my kids since I won't have any money for his school clothes. It goes on and on. John Albert, we'll talk about some more MMA Podcast alumni. I'm so livid right now. I was the biggest John Jones fan, but not anymore. That guy's bad for the sport and the fans. He and other fighters don't understand what it's like being a lower-ranked fighter like me or Jeff Hoagland. Darren Cruikshank, posing with a cat, says, sorry, kitty, only food that's on sale for you now. That's okay. You needed a diet anyway. R.I.P. UFC 151. even Rogan, who's always very careful to talk about UFC fighters because he's so popular, it'll eventually get back to him. Even he said, I'm absolutely bewildered that Jon Jones didn't accept the fight with Chael Sonnen. Never saw that coming in a million years. Now the entire UFC card is scrapped because Jones didn't accept a fight with a 185-pounder who's completely out of shape. Wow. Just wow. And there are more. It would take me another 5 minutes to read them all. Those were definitely the highlights. People aren't happy. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to add to that. My beatdown of the month is much like yours. It's the career of Jon Jones in a car crashing into the telephone pole of life.
Yeah, and his Rogan made a pretty good point recently that people will forget, like people forgot Silva Maia. Maybe that's true, but for the time being, people are not happy with Jon Jones. They are berating him, and the MMA world against Jon Jones is my beatdown of the month.
We did it.
Dun, 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 dun. So moving down the news docket, we mentioned Ronda Rousey versus Sarah Kaufman. How impressive was that shit?
Oh, man, just the amount of poop I would eat out of her butt just goes up every month. It started out at like 3 ounces, then 8. Now I'm thinking a whole bindle. Maybe after that a truck. I don't know. Yeah.
Bindle.
Yeah, bindle.
That's very impressive.
That's something. That is something.
That is really something. I guess we'll fit in our other segment we try and do every week, my 10 seconds of sports, because we don't like to talk about other sports because this is an MMA podcast, but I want to talk about sports, so I fit it all into 10 seconds, just like when I have sex, usually with a girl.
Whoa! Don't tell Hominick that.
10 seconds of fury. Yeah, he'd probably be pretty upset with me. So yeah, my 10 seconds of the sport starts now. The NHL season is actually questionable as the lockout drags on into the preseason. Speaking of preseason football, Andrew Luck, Robert Griffin look good. Tannehill announced a starter. They will do week 1. That was a little too realistic. Because I know what it sounds like when you ejaculate.
Oh, Jesus Christ. And our listeners are gone. Thank you for tuning in.
And, we'll know it's the camera that I installed on your computer. But, it's going to be crazy, NFL with replacement refs. But, Rousey's, changing the topic, Rousey, that was so freaking impressive.
Nobody likes to see a ginger get beat up like that, but I think if it's Ronda Rousey, I don't give a shit.
Part of me was wanting to root for Sarah Kaufman because I, like Sarah Kaufman, we both look pale to the point where we look sickly. But I try and root for my pale brethren.
And you're both curvy. You both got those curves.
We have vivacious curves. But, it was, I'm really looking forward to see, I really don't think anybody other than Cyborg Santos has a chance to go over a round with Rousey. Maybe the women's MMA sport will flourish more, and we'll see more fighters come up. Miesha Tate hung in there with her for a while. If Tate can up her jits a little bit, that would be a really crazy fight. But
I will help up jits. But I think the sexiest fight that ever could have been done was Gina Carano versus Ronda Rousey. Oh my God, the sex appeal. That is better than Miesha Tate, in my opinion, because Gina Carano is fucking hot, dude. Like, not in a slutty way. Not in a slutty way at all. She is just gorgeous and big-ass titties and athletic and, Muay Thai practitioner. So I wish I could have seen that fight.
Bringing you expert MMA analysis every Wednesday.
The big-ass titties on there.
I want to see that. Them there titties. But, that would, we probably won't see Carano back in the sport, especially with how successful she's been in the movie and entertainment sector. But
Furious 6 coming out next year.
Yeah.
With, everyone who's ever been in a Fast and the Furious movie, this is probably going to be the last one. They're getting everyone in for it, all the stops, and I'm happy for her, man. She doesn't have to put her body on the line, and I get to see her. And eventually, someone's gonna give her enough money to get naked. And
eventually. And that will be a good day. Moving on briskly, because we have under 5 minutes. Alistair Overeem, actually, this was a bit of really nice news to hear after all that crap surrounding John Jones turning down the Chael Sonnen fight. Alistair Overeem's management saying that he isn't going to wait around for the title, which I don't know if that means he thinks Velasquez Dos Santos will be pushed off, or if Dos Santos gets hurt and is on the rack for a while. But Alistair Overeem has said he wants to fight, whether it's for a title or not. He's not going to wait around for a title fight. He's going to keep on fighting, take as many fights as he's offered, and try and win as many fights as offered, which is such a nice sentiment to hear when the last week of MMA has been surrounded with this John Jones bullshit.
Yeah, you can say steroids all you want or horse meat, but there's one thing that you can't say about Alistair Overeem, and that he isn't a badass motherfucker. He's still my favorite fighter of all time, just the things he's accomplished. The very last K1 heavyweight Grand Prix champion, he's beat the likes of Badr Hari and, Peter Ayers, and then he came into the UFC and, put it on Brock and retired Brock Lesnar. So, like you said, it's just really nice to see a guy who's been dealing with these things and to come back and say, I just want to fight. I'm not going to wait for Dos Santos, Dos Santos is a guy who's normally very nice and soft-spoken, is saying that Alistair Overeem is a bully and he talks too much. So I think that Alistair might be getting in his head, and I've always said that Alistair Overeem can beat Junior Dos Santos. So we'll see what happens.
Definitely. I think everyone wants to see that fight so bad, because you have the best boxer in the heavyweight division against the best striker in the heavyweight division. It's kind of like almost a Henderson versus Jones, whereas in that it'll probably be more technical because both guys are really skilled wrestlers, whereas Dos Santos and Overeem, both guys are going to keep it standing. But yeah, that would be a great fight, and we'll probably see it happen after if that is Dos Santos can get past Velasquez. And they've been talking quite a bit of shit too, so it's pretty nice to see that.
Really, I wasn't aware of that, but we're kind of out of time, so let's
we've actually got a couple minutes. Let's talk about really quick. Joe Lauzon, Gray Maynard slated for UFC 155. Lauzon apparently asked for Gray Maynard. I don't know why you would ever do that, but that really should be an interesting fight. Maynard has the advantage of wrestling and the striking against Lauzon, but Lauzon, I guess, is pretty confident in his jits.
I've got Lauzon by submission. I can't count that guy out anymore. I can't discount it. I always thought he folded in big fights, but choking out Melvin Guillard and Jamie Varner is no joke. They're both power-punching wrestlers who, in my opinion, hit harder than Gray Maynard. Gray Maynard has better wrestling, but that doesn't matter when you hit the ground with a guy like Joe Lauzon. I got Joe Lauzon by a tap-out.
I have Maynard winning this by a decision. Maynard's only lost one fight in his career, and that was that trilogy fight against Frankie Edgar. It's kind of funny. I think that's the only trilogy I can think of where the record's 1-1-1, a win for each side and a draw. But I was so happy to see Maynard take that split decision against a backpedaling Clay Guida, and really should be interesting seeing him fight a guy who's definitely not going to run away from him in Joe Lauzon. And yeah.
I was just sitting there waiting. I'm like, okay, move on. No, okay, hi.
What'd you learn today, Chris?
I learned today that there is a miniature alien living inside Mark Hominick's head.
That's very true. I learned that pretty interesting analogy that, according to Robert Drysdale, no gi jujitsu is like playing an Atari, but because of all the different things you are able to do in gi jujitsu is like an Xbox 360. Thought that was pretty interesting, but definitely thank you for tuning in. We are around every Wednesday night. We actually pushed our hours back. If you didn't notice, we pushed it an hour back, so we're now at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Definitely keep up with us on Twitter. We announce who we're going to have on. We try and keep the MMApodcast.com as updated as possible. We're updating that with stories almost every day. Check that out. Give us more hits there. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Thanks, guys, and call in more. We'd love to have your calls.
And like we say at the end of every podcast,
and we gone.
We gone?
Tomorrow.